Hey everybody, welcome to Hash It Out. I am your host, RJ Balde. In this episode, I'll be talking to Dr. Jon Vaught about his company's new developments in producing high THCV yielding cannabis varieties. We'll also talk about the future of federal cannabis policy reform, emphasizing social equity, sending hemp to space, and much more. Without further ado, it's time to hash it out. My guest today is the CEO of the cannabis and hemp genetics platform company, Front Range Biosciences. Welcome to the show, Dr. Jon Vaught. How's it going, Doc?
It's going great. Thanks for having me.
Hey, I'm stoked to have you on the show. I'm stoked to ask you about all you've got going on at Front Range. How's it been going, man? We're in almost mid-February type vibe. How's your year been so far?
Oh, we're off to a great start. We've had lots of exciting developments. We're building some great relationships out in California. We're getting geared up to spin up a cannabis genetics program here in Colorado. The hemp farmers are getting ready to plant their fields, for the 2021 growing season. We're off to a great start. We got some breakthrough developments in genetics out of the R&D program. So yeah, there's a lot to talk about.
Man, yeah, I'm stoked to dive in. You had a pretty interesting piece of news come out just the other day that I'm stoked to ask you about in just a little bit. How has it been over at Front Range during, the course of the year? It's obviously been a unique set of circumstances this past year, more than any in recent memory. So how have you been faring during the course of the past year? How has your staff been faring? And what's the vibe over at Front Range?
Yeah, so it's certainly been a tough year. I think it's been it was a challenging year for everybody. The COVID pandemic was just a bit of a black swan event. It's certainly been challenging. But I have to say when these kinds of things happen, you put your head down, you focus on what you can do, the things that are beyond your control, there's nothing you can do. But those that you can control, we put our best foot forward. We've navigated pretty well, actually. We're able to double down on some of our R&D efforts and build up our product pipeline. Lots of exciting breeding happened last year. We also ran one of the largest field trial programs in hemp. We've been building some new relationships, and all in all, I think we've fared pretty well. I mean, we certainly had to change some of our daily processes. A lot more remote work, like for everybody. Certainly, greenhouses you can't work remotely from, unfortunately. So we've had to keep our greenhouses and labs operating, with new safety protocols and things like that. But yeah, overall, I think we've really been able to fare pretty well. And, the team has really come together. I have to say, I'm really fortunate to have such an incredible, team, behind me. They've pulled together, they've pivoted priorities, shifted workflows, and rolled their sleeves up, and kept trying, despite, some of the challenges that we've all faced. I think people certainly feel stress, in general. Last year was just a crazy year. Some of the political stuff that went on, the social unrest. I mean, it's been pretty wild. So I think people were feeling pretty challenged by all of that. But, we've kind of stuck together as a team, and here we are. We're excited about 2021. I think there's looks like there's some tailwinds coming, especially for the cannabis industry. I think, the momentum that we're seeing is really exciting.
Totally. Yeah. I've asked that question pretty much to every guest that's come on the show, because we happen to have started the show last March, like right when everything was happening. That's like the week after everything shut down was my first episode of this show. And the overall, I guess, sort of consistency that I hear from a lot of people who run cannabis businesses, particularly during the course of the past year, is that, sort of being in the cannabis space, I guess, lends itself more than other industries to being adaptable and having to make, adjustments and changes and modifications on the fly, because just like everyone this year in the cannabis space, you could wake up one day and everything is different, or there's a new hurdle that you have to overcome. I don't know if you feel the same way, but it seems like you might.
Yeah, absolutely. Before I started this company about a little almost 6 years ago now, I spent 15 years in the biotech world, and it's also a fast-paced, high risk, high reward environment. But cannabis is pretty unique. I mean, the pace at which this industry has grown and changed, the ups and downs in the market, and if you add in hemp, while it's a different regulatory market or different regulatory framework, different market, it's still the same plant. So I kind of frame hemp and cannabis up together. It's a very rocky ride, and you have to be ready to navigate. But it's true of any emerging market, any emerging industry. You got to be ready to move quickly, and that's one of the advantages of being a startup and a small company is you can be more nimble, you can pivot, and we certainly had to do some of that here, and but again, it's par for the course, especially in cannabis.
Yeah, for sure. And now, how long ago did Front Range Biosciences start?
So we were founded, we incorporated in 2015. We didn't really start operations till the end of 2016. And, since then we've grown the company significantly. We currently have folks in Colorado, California, and then, again, we have a research outpost in Barcelona, Spain, through our partnership with the CRAG, which is one of Europe's leading crop genomics and research institutes.
Wow. I hope you're able to get back out to Barcelona soon.
Me too.
You mentioned.
We'll see. We'll see how well that goes. Right now, I spend most of my time, kind of here in Colorado or California, working with our teams here. But yeah, the folks at the CRAG, they're they got a lot of exciting things going on. We actually last year we were the CRAG, and through our partnership, we were awarded a license to start doing more work on the kind of medical drug type cannabis side of so it was a really unique thing that happened, and we're really excited. There's a lot of cool things going over there, so fingers crossed I get back out there at some point soon. Yeah,
totally. Well, I mean, Front Range has exciting things happening here too as well. FRB, which is short for Front Range Biosciences, according to the press releases and things, made an announcement in the last, by the time this recording comes out, it'll have been just in the last few days, regarding the launch of a new product line of high THCV cannabis varieties in both Colorado and California, which FRB says produces twice the yield of typical THCV producing plants. So I'm stoked to dive into this and ask you all about this. Up until now, THCV has, sort of been a lesser known or lesser focused upon cannabinoids. So tell me about why it's become a focus over at FRB.
Yeah, so it's really interesting. When we look at the cannabis plant, right? We think about it as scientists, right? At our core, we're heavily focused on R&D and product development, right? And so we obviously work with both hemp and cannabis. To us, it's all the same. But when we look at all of the different compounds that this plant produces, right? You've got cannabinoids, you've got terpenes. We've also got some interesting developments around some other types of compounds that we've now been able to discover and breed for in this plant. We're really just at the very beginning, right, of our understanding of this plant. So when what we did in building our platform, our breeding platform, is we've collected cannabis genetics from all over the world. So through our partnership with the CRAG in particular, also a number of licensing and germplasm acquisitions that we've made. We've been able to build a very large library that represents plants from all over, pretty much every continent, all over the world. And then we take those and we cross them, we study them, we look at their genomes, we look at the chemistry that they produce, and then we begin to, target, certain developments or certain traits, right? And THCV is one of those very interesting kind of minor cannabinoids, although I think it's going to become a major cannabinoid in the near future here. that we knew early on there was some anecdotal evidence. It was a really exciting compound, so we again, of course, started using our team and our technology and our process to begin to develop improvements, right? So how can you produce this compound in a higher concentration? And the reason THCV is really exciting is because anecdotally at least, and I have to put that out there because there's not a lot of double-blind clinical trials, peer-reviewed
Sure.
research just yet on it, although it's happening. But generally, consumers, when they try it, they feel it. It's different, right? They report appetite suppression. They report energizing effects, similar to like caffeine or tea, and a much more clear-headed experience. And again, they were like, man, I didn't get the munchies, and I always get the munchies. So that type of it's really significant, right? Because that's something that people can feel. And at the end of the day, the cannabis industry is evolving very quickly, and consumers are they're looking for something next level, right? They're really looking for a new experience. And the brands that are emerging and the product pipelines that they're building, it's all about these experiences, right? And being able to broaden the consumer demographic as well, bring in new consumers in the cannabis space. People that never have tried cannabis, never would have tried cannabis, right? But now they're like, oh,
Sure.
well, going to see what this is about. And I think compounds like THCV represent huge product opportunities to bring those consumers, into the market.
That's rad. I'm stoked to see this sort of trend in focusing and I guess enhancing or highlighting certain cannabinoids. It's so fascinating to me to just see, first of all, just see how far we've come since the inception of the legal cannabis industry, and with more research being available and more information becoming available, it's an awesome trend to see. Now, your company cited a growing body of research for THCV, linking THCV to therapeutic benefits, like I have it listed here, like lessening tremors and seizures in ALS and Parkinson's patients, blocking fight or flight responses in PTSD patients, and being an effective analgesic for treating pain and migraines, which is, fascinating to me. And we often hear about the quote unquote entourage effect of all of the cannabinoids of cannabis, working together to produce an effect. And you already touched on this a bit, but what is the benefit that you see and that your company sees in isolating and enhancing certain cannabinoids?
Oh wow, it's a great question, and there's a big answer to it because the sky's the limit. So we're just getting started. So when you look at cannabinoids, I think there's north of 140 that have been identified in one form or the other. There I think more to be identified, honestly. There's over 500 unique different compounds that are produced in this plant. You start including things like terpenes and flavonoids. There's just a whole, the list goes on and on and on. So we're really just getting started in terms of our understanding of all of these different compounds. More importantly, the endocannabinoid system is something that, because of prohibition and because of the smear campaign against cannabis and it being framed up as some kind of harmful substance and harmful plant, because of all of that, scientific research was just, it was creeping along. There was a handful of pioneers out in Israel and maybe a handful of other places in the world that were doing some of this research around cannabinoids and the endocannabinoid system. But reality is that it was just something that wasn't even looked at. It's not even mentioned in medical training and medical books, right? And it turns out that there are receptors throughout almost every major organ system in our body that are part of the endocannabinoid system. So again, there's really exciting developments on the therapeutic side. Obviously we saw Epidiolex being the first CBD approved, or the first botanical, cannabis derived CBD drug that went out in the market. I think there's a number of other pharmaceutical companies out there that are probably cranking away on modifying, different cannabinoid compounds and working on drugs across a wide range of areas. And again, I think when you look at the endocannabinoid system, it's got opportunity to play a role in modulating, all kinds of different functions. So whether it's things like mental health, immune system, things around the gut, and things like appetite modulation, and inflammation, pain relief. I mean, the list just goes on and on and on and on. And I think, the more we learn about it, the more we're going to see applications in these different areas. I think at the end of the day, right now, it's still very early. So again, this is just some of the areas that we see when we scan the literature that people are looking at for compounds like THCV. Whether it's preclinical or clinical, there are a number of studies underway. So I think the jury's out, right? We'll need to see some of the data before we start really making these claims about it solving problems. Again, I'm a scientist. We have to be, really thoughtful about that. I think sometimes people get out a little too far over their skis, in terms of making claims about things. So we got to be careful about that. But I think we're really just at the beginning, and I think the potential is enormous on that side. On the other side of the equation, the consumer side. I mean, look at the strength of the cannabis industry over the last year, and during this pandemic, so many consumers are looking at cannabis. It's a much, I don't know if to say healthier, but it's an interesting alternative to things like alcohol and tobacco and some of the other consumer products that are out there.
Yeah, I'm interested to ask you then, personally, you mentioned that there it has always been a severe lack of information regarding cannabis and hemp in medical literature, or I don't know if that's the right phrase, or there's always been a lack of access to that sort of information or those sorts of studies, or that sort of research. How did you find out about all of this personally? What did you do to sort of take it upon yourself to get all of this knowledge, and where did you find the resources that got you to where you are now?
Yeah, that's probably there's a long answer to that question. I mean, my background is in science and biotech. I've got a pretty extensive background both on the science and business side. I have a PhD in chemistry from the University of Colorado at Boulder. I spent about 15 years leading cross-functional teams, developing new technologies, in human diagnostics, a little bit in food safety. So that's where I kind of started my career, and where how I was trained. A lot of that work was around human healthcare, so human diagnostics. I helped develop technologies that really, a lot of it was serving big pharma, so providing different types of lab tests for things like target validation, early diagnosis of chronic illness, things like cancer and heart disease. Also building data for submitting clinical studies to the FDA, and running some of these biomarker assays. So that was really where I started my career, and then a little bit in food safety. I also did some work in the nonprofit sector. I started a 501c3 here in Boulder called Mountain Flower Dairy. It's a little goat farm. Whole separate conversation that we can have at some point. Though. But so all that, so I got really interested in agriculture as part of that. And then, given my background on the human diagnostic side, working very closely with pharma companies and kind of understanding some of the challenges in human health, when cannabis became legal here in Colorado, and it started to reach the market size that it did fairly quickly here, and legalization continued to drive forward, especially over the last 5 to 6 years, I really saw it as the opportunity of a lifetime to take a lot of the things that I've learned, working in this highly regulated space around healthcare, and biotech and pharma, and then even in agriculture, and move it, kind of take that experience and help move the needle forward, in the cannabis industry. And, and with a focus on cannabis agriculture, right? Because I think agriculture is kind of really one of those fundamental sectors in our society, in our world today, that, where you can have huge impact, right? It's got big impact on climate change, on food supply, and, sustainability. So, that's really what got me into this. And to wrap it up, when I look at cannabis as a scientist, it is a gold mine of unique, potential product lines, right? I mean, we just talked about some of the chemistry that it produces. There are not hardly any other plants on the planet that have the kind of chemical diversity that you can produce in cannabis through breeding, right? I mean, it's pretty remarkable. It's like a little chemical factory. And then when you add in the fact that, as we move into the industrial side of the equation for hemp, that you can produce, a very unique, a very competitive, plant-based protein profile, compared to the other plant-based protein like soy or
Sure.
there's a number of them, pea protein. It's an opportunity for a plant-based protein source. And then on the fiber side, we've got an opportunity for, industrial materials, building materials that are much more sustainable than a lot of what we do today in textiles and building materials with lumber and cotton. So again, it's just, it's kind of like a kid in a candy shop being a scientist. So that's my long-winded story of how I got here.
Totally. Oh yeah, I can imagine that. It has to quite literally feel like we've been sitting on this gold mine for years and years and years, and sort of just, it was always just sort of brushed aside or put under these labels of being dangerous. And it's great that in this day and age, we're just beginning to, unlock all of the potential of the hemp and cannabis plants. But it must be an interesting sort of juxtaposition of being grateful to where we are now, but also, wondering what took us so long to get here.
That's a long, that's a tough question to answer. It's challenging, and we do, we still got a long way to go. I mean, I think, looking at, the number of states where people are still incarcerated, and the damage that this, that prohibition has done on different communities, from the legal impact. I mean, not only is there a lot more to do on the scientific side, but there's still a lot more to do on the social side of this equation as well. And for our society, right? Yes. And I think the science is clear, right? The science is clear. There is, there's no way this plant is any more harmful than, alcohol or caffeine. In fact, you could really say the data would support it's actually probably a lot safer in many ways.
From my experience, yeah.
Absolutely. Well, you can look at the number of alcohol-related deaths to the number of cannabis-related deaths,
totally,
which is a very, very big difference. So, anyways. Yeah. And again, it's time to get out of the old way of thinking and embrace the opportunity of what this plant can do for consumers, for people that are dealing with different diseases. I think for its ability to impact agriculture is just incredible. And again, we've got a lot of work to do still, but I think the tide is changing finally.
Totally, yeah, better late than never for sure. Now, speaking of agriculture, I want to talk about, of course, the farmers out there who are the ones, putting in the back-breaking work to get these plants to us and are really tending to the plant. You said that, or the press release that FRB put out regarding the THCV announcement talked about how cannabis growers have up until recently faced a lot of challenges when it comes to producing high THCV cannabis varieties with, the lack of supply and limited product availability, among other issues. So how has FRB been tackling that to make THCV varieties more accessible?
Yeah, that's a great question. What we've done is we've leveraged a series of technologies, right? So we use things like what people call marker-assisted breeding. So these are, next generation breeding technologies, leveraging things like genomics and bioinformatics to speed up the breeding cycle, right? And, generally when you're plant breeding, right, you're crossing two plants, you're looking through a big population of seeds for the needle in the haystack, right? You're looking for the one that has all the right properties that you're looking for. And with all of these technologies that we've developed, and our chemistry team too, we've got an incredible chemistry team, that we look at cannabinoids and terpenes that are a lot of folks maybe don't look at the same way. But so leveraging those two kind of technology platforms, we were able to find kind of hone in, I should say, on the right plants very quickly that not only produce a high amount of the interesting compound THCV that we're targeting, but they're also good growers, right? And again, being kind of a farmer focused company, and farmers at the end of the day are our primary customers. Of course. Generally THCV, what we hear from a lot of the growers in California is like, oh, this plant's hard to grow. We haven't really had any luck with it. Produces such a terrible yield. It's not even worth it. And then the extractors, they have to go and extract like a few percentage points of THCV out of, a bunch of biomass. So it's not a very efficient process. So that was kind of the feedback that we got. So what we've been able to do, even just with the first few rounds in a first generation product, is increase the vigor of the plant, right? So, this plant is a vigorous grower. It produces a higher yield. So the overall weight of the flower is just as good or even better than a lot of, your average high THC varieties that you produce, or even hemp varieties that are high CBD. So, it's now producing like, what like the other plants do. And then it's got a higher percentage of THCV. And a lot of that is unfortunately just related to the biology, right? So, this is such a rare trait, in terms of cannabis plants that produce THCV. The biology, it's not something that it just does easily, right? It doesn't just make a lot of it easily. So we had to really look for it and select for it and improve it. And now our goal is to, now that we've got a good foundation and a solid producer, we've now got multiple, other product lines that we're working to launch, right? As we partner with different cannabis companies and brands, looking at different flavor profiles. So being able to increase different terpenes, also vary the ratio of THC to THCV, and then even being able to produce THCV in hemp compliant cannabis, right? Because, that's another interesting, opportunity here, right? So that this could be something that could be on the hemp side of the supply chain as well. So it produces low THC, but high THCV. And again, given the biology of the way this plant works, THCV and THC are closely related. That's a pretty challenging proposition, but I think we've cracked the code, and that's something that we're also hoping to be able to announce here in the near future is THCV on the hemp side of the equation as well.
Wow, that's rad. Yeah, I will definitely have to keep up with y'all, because that is a very exciting development. Wow. And you mentioned that you have, you're looking to now sort of, I guess, expand, or you're looking into new ways in which to keep the customer happy. You said in the press release that the cannabis market is evolving quickly, which is certainly true. And you also said that consumers are constantly looking for new and unique experiences. So what do you and the folks over at FRB see as the current or upcoming trends in cannabis and with cannabis consumers? And how are you seeing customers' appetites evolving?
Yeah, that's a great question as well. So it's really interesting as you look at the cannabis market over the last 10 years. And again, we're not a consumer facing company, right? We're a technology company. We work with growers and help develop genetics. But we certainly watch what happens on the consumer side, right? And we keep a close eye on the market and get a lot of feedback, right? That's super important. But what we've seen over the last decade or so is the primary market driver has still been what was probably prior to legalization the black market, right? So people that just traditional cannabis users, right? People that have used cannabis, they like cannabis, it's part of their their daily lives, has been for some amount of time, right? And that was really a lot of the primary consumer segment, right, or the demographic, I think, for cannabis. In the last 5 years, that's really started to change, right? Especially in markets like Colorado, right? In Colorado, which, has really been a leader in terms of their regulatory framework and, how they've rolled out the market and managed it. It really is what I would consider one of the more mature markets in the industry. And there you've got, customers are looking for something different now, right? It's no longer just the excitement of, oh, hey, we can buy weed now. Like, let's go buy weed. It's okay, I want this flavor, right? Like, I want something that doesn't make me sleepy. I want something that doesn't make me hungry anymore. I want something I can microdose, when I'm at the office, right? Like, these are the different things that consumers are starting to look for. And it's starting to broaden the consumer demographic, right? So now you've got people that maybe they tried cannabis in college or high school or whenever, they did it when they were kids, and and now they're now they're professionals, and they would never do something, right? It was illegal. It was and they'll have a glass of wine at night, or a whiskey or whatever, right? Sure. Now they're like, well, hey, I heard about this really low dose edible thing that I can try, or a little pill that I'm used to, and and people are starting to try those types of products, and they're like, I mean, I've got all my, my friends and the people, I'm always showing them new products and saying, hey, you guys should check this out. This is really cool. Like, there's technology behind it. It's not just, it's not going to like knock you on your butt and you're not going to be able to remember your name for a few hours, right? It's, it's like having a glass of wine, these little microdoses and things like that. So, I think that's just really changing the overall market. And we're going to see a much broader, demographic of folks that are starting to try these products. And, and then you've got the hemp side. You've got things like dietary ingredients and supplements, and, how CBD and, how those types of things fit into the equation. I mean, again, I think consumers want these types of products. And, as long as they can be, managed and delivered in a safe and reliable, format, I think we're going to see, continued growth of the market.
Totally. And I'm curious to ask you how you feel about the future of legalization on a federal level in this country, because, with the incoming of the new presidential administration, as well as new leadership in the House and the Senate, there has sort of been a renewed hope and a renewed conversation for cannabis policy reform on a federal level. There's obviously been a lot of buzz talking about it. The FDA is in talks to, a bill was introduced that, if approved, would allow the FDA to permit the use of CBD as a dietary supplement. So I'm just wondering what are your thoughts on the hopes of some major federal cannabis policy reform happening in the next few years, or in somewhere in the near future?
I think we're well on our way. If somebody would have asked me, 20 years ago, would I be here today? I would have completely, I would have looked at them like they were crazy.
Totally.
The concept of any kind of broad scale, federal, even just decriminalization, much less full-blown legalization, was just not even something that seemed feasible within our lifetime. So the progress we've made is important to note. I think moving forward, with the new administration, with the broad and really pretty significant public support that there is, right? And it's been around now for years. It's not like for at least 4 or 5 years now, I think the majority of Americans, at least, would say that cannabis should be allowed medically, or some form or another, right? And that number is always growing. So I think we're going to continue to see, regulatory changes. I think the challenge is, and you can look at like what happened in Canada, for example, when they rolled out federal legalization, and, you had this massive buildup in still a developing supply chain, and, and they've done a great job in some ways, but I'm sure they've had like, oh geez, rolling this out at a federal level was challenging, right? And I think the same thing here for the U.S. I mean, when you look at, I mean, it's honestly true of any industry. Regulation is always years and years behind the market, right? And that's just the way it goes. And it's true in energy and food and drugs. It's always that way. So again, I think we're going to see continued movement down that path. I think, for example, let's just take a step back, right? In the middle of the pandemic, all of the things that have happened, all the things that we're dealing with on a day-to-day basis today, trying to roll out a broad federal program would take years, right? So even if we start this year, I think it'll take several years. I think what we're going to see is a continued, state-by-state rollout. Again, there's a number of new states that have just announced they're going to have it on the ballot for 2021. We had, 5, I think, states pass measures in the last election cycle. So I think we're going to continue to see that. I think the most important thing that the whole industry needs to continue to unite around and hopefully our regulators will pay attention to are some of these key developments around things like banking, right? There's no reason that people in cannabis shouldn't be able to bank, and that some places are still having to deal with cash. Like, that's just a safety issue, and it's silly, right? So I think things like safe banking, hopefully we'll see that. I think some of the changes around the FDA, trying to embrace this a little bit more. As we get more and more safety data in, the FDA's got a hard job, right? I mean, a lot of people, hit them with a lot of blame for things, but the reality is you're tasked with trying to make sure that companies don't, experiment on people and put things out that are unsafe in the market, right?
Yeah, totally.
So, I think we're going to see things like that. The dietary supplements on the CBD side and the hemp side would be, monumental. The U.S. Hemp Roundtable, who I've worked with over the years, they've done a lot of great work there. So again, I think the tide is shifted, and I think it's in the right direction. But I think we still have a few years of work to do, in terms of being able to get to that true federal legalization level.
Certainly. Yeah, I echo you with that. I think we have finally started heading in the right direction after maybe 4 years of receding, maybe swimming upstream a little bit. At least now we have a little bit of that tailwind that you're talking about now. And turning a societal ship is a big task. Turning that wheel into another direction takes years and years and years and endless advocacy. But if it doesn't come this year or even next year, I definitely do feel that it's inevitable eventually.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's no putting this cat back in the bag. It's, the size of the market, the public sentiment, the science, all of it is there, right? It's just about, everybody being able to catch up with it and, and work together, honestly. It takes a lot of teamwork across the regulatory bodies and the industry.
It's only a matter of time. Now, the last question I want to ask you about is sort of checking in to something that y'all were up to last year, because we spent our conversation talking about what's going on here on Earth, but in summer 2020, FRB partnered with SpaceX to send hemp and coffee tissue samples to the International Space Station to observe how zero gravity would affect the plant's gene expression. You said at that time that it would take anywhere between 6 to 24 months to produce a viable plant from the tissue culture. So I'm just wondering if there has been any update on that, because I remember hearing about that in the summer, and I was like, this is what I love to see. You know what I mean? Like, especially during that time, I was like, we love to see that.
Yeah. So one quick clarification. So we did the plants did hitch a ride on a SpaceX mission, but it wasn't through necessarily partnership with SpaceX. It was actually with the BioServe group, which is the aerospace engineering group out of the University of Colorado Boulder, and then also a company, Space Technology Holdings, which has been funding some interesting research in space and zero gravity. So And then, then they were part of we put the plants up on or the tissue culture samples as part of the payload going up to the space station.
Got you.
On a SpaceX
So SpaceX
ride.
was kind of the Uber for you guys.
There we go.
In this case. Gotcha.
I think that's the right way to frame it up.
Gotcha.
So yeah, no, it was really cool. It was a really exciting opportunity. We've been looking at some of the genomic data that came back as a result of some of that. We were able to regenerate a few plants and study them. Regeneration of plants from tissue culture, a lot of people talk about it as like it's some magical thing. It's not. It's actually really challenging.
Sure.
It's very plant variety specific, and a lot of times the plants aren't, they don't come out of this, kind of weird bubble that they were in, just being, we're ready for the world. So it's a challenging, it's a challenging thing. But we've been able to take a look at it. No major announcements, at this point. It was really, just an early stage, R&D experiment to see what we could observe. Also, just to, again, part of it is just making sure that we can get the material in the right condition up to the space station and then back safely.
Sure.
That alone is one of the big pieces, and not having all of the samples, degrade or die. And so we were able to do that piece successfully. And then again, we've done a lot of genomics work on it. And, I think for the first type of experiment like this in these plants, I think we're learning a fair amount, right? We're kind of understanding, are there any major underlying changes? It was only a 30-day trip, so it wasn't that long. But yeah, we'll see. We'll keep everybody updated if anything else, exciting comes out of that. I think it's still a very interesting area of research for plant biotechnology, to understand what happens to plants in zero gravity environments.
Totally, man. Yeah, I would love to see Matt Damon growing hemp on the surface of Mars sometime soon, man. And I would love to see the Front Range Biosciences logo right there.
Absolutely.
Too. That'd be dope.
Powered by FRB, straight to Mars. I would
There you go.
I would love it. Yeah,
there you go, man.
We're working on that. We'll keep everybody posted as we go for the next mission.
Definitely keep me posted, because you have an open seat for coming back on the show whenever that does happen. Yes, indeed.
That sounds good. That sounds great.
Hey, man, Dr. Jon Vaught, thank you so much for taking the time to share your expertise with me. I really appreciate the conversation. Please keep up the good work over at FRB. And before we go, where can our viewers find out more about the latest developments over at Front Range? Yeah,
so our website, frontrangebiosciences.com. You can also check out frbgenetics.com, which is where we showcase some of the genetic developments through our cannabis partnerships. And we're on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, all the social media channels. So come check us out.
Right on. Yeah, and all those channels will be linked down below in the description for y'all watching. Dr. Jon Vaught, thank you again so much. Stick around just after we wrap here, just so I can say thank you to you off air. But thank you so much again, man. Please stay safe out there, be well, and hopefully we'll be able to catch up again soon.
Yeah, that sounds great. Really appreciate the opportunity. And thanks everybody for tuning in.
You got it, man. Be well.
All right. Thanks, you too.
My thanks again to Dr. Jon Vaught for joining me. If you are a member of the cannabis community and have a story you want to share with us, we would love to hear from you. You can reach the show at hashitout@TRICHOMES.com. You can help others find the show by taking a moment to subscribe to the podcast and write a review. You can also join the discussion with industry insiders and get your voice heard by joining the community at TRICHOMES.com and following us on all social media. Hash It Out is produced by David Fortin and presented by TRICHOMES.com. I am your host, RJ Balde. Make sure to hit the like button, subscribe, hit the bell for notifications, and I'll catch you next time.